Emma and I met during our junior year of high school. She was the kind of girl who made the whole world seem brighter just by stepping into a room. Her laughter wasn't just a sound. It was a melody, a song that pulled me closer every time I heard it. Emma had this aura about her, an energy that made you believe in the good things in life, even when the world was rough. We started dating almost naturally, as if the universe had planned it all along. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a Hollywood-style romance. It was in the smaller moments, her smile at the pep rally, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the quiet understanding we shared when words weren't enough. By the time we graduated, it felt like we had been together forever. Our families used to tease us about being inseparable, but I never minded. It wasn't that Emma was my other half. She was the whole. Together, we planned our future. College was just a first step. Marriage was inevitable. Everyone knew it, and so did we. We married in late October, under a canopy of crimson and golden leaves. Her family's backyard transformed into a fairy tale setting, with string lights casting a warm glow as the sun set behind us. I'll never forget how she looked that day. Her dress simple but elegant, her smile bright enough to outshine the chandeliers her father had rented. I held her hands as we exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of our lives. Emma's voice wavered slightly when she said, "I do," and it made me smile because even then, she was perfect in her imperfections. We didn't have much starting out. I was just beginning my career as an engineer, and she was launching her dream boutique. But it didn't matter. What we had in love, we made up for in determination. The early years of our marriage were a whirlwind of late nights and big dreams. My job demanded long hours, but Emma was my rock. Her boutique started small, just a corner store downtown, but her passion turned it into something special. Watching her thrive made me prouder than I'd ever admit. We had our traditions: Friday pizza nights, lazy Sundays watching old movies, midnight drives just to feel the wind in our hair. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Conversations about starting a family became more frequent. Maybe next year, we'd say, putting it off until the boutique was stable, until my promotion came through, until everything was just right. Looking back, I wonder if we were too focused on the future to see the cracks forming in the present. It started with small things. Emma was more tired than usual, often distracted even when we were together. I noticed the way she'd check her phone more often, her smiles less radiant, her laughter quieter. I chalked it up to stress from work. Running a business wasn't easy, and I knew how much she poured into it. Then came the late nights. Networking events, she called them, though they seemed more frequent than they should have been. When I'd ask about them, her answers were vague, her tone dismissive. I didn't press her. I trusted her. But trust, as I'd soon learn, wasn't enough. One night, Emma's phone buzzed incessantly on the counter. She was in the shower, so I reached for it without thinking, intending to silence the notifications. That's when I saw his name, Liam, work. The messages were playful, flirty in a way that made my stomach twist. "Can't wait to see you." One read, followed by a string of emojis that felt far too intimate for a professional relationship. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting, letting jealousy get the best of me. But the unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. That night, as we lay in bed, I asked her about Liam. At first, she laughed it off, calling him a harmless flirt. "He's just like that," she said. "It's nothing." But her tone betrayed her. She wasn't dismissing my concerns. She was deflecting. "Emma," I said, my voice firmer than I expected, "I need you to be honest with me." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. But instead, she rolled over, mumbling something about being tired. That was the first night I slept in the guest room. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us grew. Emma's late nights became more frequent, her explanations more rehearsed. The connection we once shared felt like a distant memory. One evening, I found myself scrolling through her phone while she was out. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I needed answers. What I found shattered me. The texts weren't innocent. They weren't harmless. Liam wasn't just a colleague. He was something far more intimate. There were plans for dinners, whispered confessions of missing you, and photos that left no room for doubt. My hands shook as I read, the betrayal sinking in like a knife, twisting deeper with each message. When Emma came home that night, I was waiting for her. The evidence was laid out on the dining table, each printout a stark reminder of what we once had and what she had thrown away. Her face went pale as she saw it all. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. It got out of hand." Her words felt hollow, her tears meaningless. "Why, Emma?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this to us?" She couldn't answer. Or maybe she didn't want to. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and confusion. Emma moved into the guest room, leaving our bedroom cold and empty. I couldn't look at her without feeling the sting of betrayal. But amidst the pain, something shifted. I realized I couldn't live in this limbo, waiting for her to decide if she wanted to fight for our marriage or walk away. If she had made her choice, then so would I. I began documenting everything. The texts, the financial irregularities I noticed in her business accounts, the growing number of unexplained expenses. I reached out to a lawyer, someone who specialized in infidelity cases. Together, we crafted a plan, a way to protect myself and ensure that Emma would face the consequences of her actions. Emma thought my silence was acceptance. She thought she had won, that I was too weak to fight back. But when she returned from a weekend trip with Liam, she found me waiting. A manila envelope sat on the table, filled with everything she had tried to hide. "This is the end," I told her, my voice steady. "You've made your choices. Now it's my turn." Emma didn't speak for a long time after I handed her the envelope. She sat at the dining table, staring at the documents like they might dissolve into nothing if she looked long enough. Finally, she looked up at me, her face pale and streaked with tears. "You can't do this," she whispered. Her voice wasn't pleading, it was panicked, desperate. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Emma, I didn't do this. You did." Her betrayal wasn't just personal. It had infiltrated every corner of our lives. The man she chose to betray me with wasn't just someone outside our circle. Liam had been involved in several business ventures with Emma's boutique, blending their personal and professional lives in ways that had significant consequences. I'd uncovered enough evidence to make her legally vulnerable. While her actions in our marriage were devastating, her poor decisions in her business dealings were what gave me leverage. I filed for divorce within the week. Emma's lawyer reached out almost immediately, offering to negotiate, to amicably settle our disputes. But there was no amicable solution to betrayal. The legal proceedings turned into a battlefield. Emma fought to protect her boutique, claiming it was her lifeblood, but the evidence I presented proved that her affair had blurred the lines between personal and professional. Expenses for romantic getaways had been charged to the company, as had business dinners that were anything but professional. With my lawyer's guidance, we tied her financial misconduct to her infidelity. In the eyes of the court, Emma had broken not just my trust but the law. As the divorce dragged on, the house became a prison. Emma stayed in the guest room, though her presence in the home felt like an unwelcome shadow. We spoke only when necessary, our conversations cold and clipped. I started spending more time at work or with friends, finding solace in the world outside. The house, once a sanctuary filled with laughter and love, was now a battlefield of silence and tension. Emma, for her part, seemed to wither. Gone was the confident, ambitious woman I'd fallen in love with. In her place was someone broken by her own choices, though she'd never admit it. The tipping point came during one of Emma's networking events. She had invited Liam to a company gala, a bold move considering the circumstances. I decided to attend, not out of curiosity, but to make a statement. The evening unfolded like a scene from a drama. Emma, dressed to the nines, moved through the crowd with Liam by her side. They laughed, toasted glasses, and acted as though their actions had no consequences. But the room froze when a video began playing on the large projector screen, a series of slides showing the financial discrepancies tied to her affair. Names, dates, and figures flashed across the screen, each one painting a clearer picture of her betrayal. Emma's face turned ghostly pale. The whispers in the room grew louder, and Liam slipped out before the presentation ended, leaving her alone to face the fallout. The day Emma finally moved out felt like a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I watched from the doorway as movers packed her belongings into a truck. She didn't say goodbye, and I didn't offer any parting words. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. Not the tense silence of unspoken anger, but a calm, peaceful quiet. I walked through the rooms, reclaiming the space that had been tainted by her presence. I redecorated slowly, painting walls, rearranging furniture, and removing anything that reminded me of Emma. The house began to feel like mine again, a place where I could heal and rebuild. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work and hobbies I'd long neglected. I joined a hiking group, rediscovered my love for photography, and even took up woodworking. Each new venture was a step toward reclaiming the pieces of myself that had been overshadowed by my marriage. Therapy became a lifeline. My therapist helped me untangle the web of emotions I'd been trapped in: anger, sadness, guilt, and even a lingering sense of responsibility for Emma's choices. Slowly, I began to forgive, not her, but myself. The legal proceedings concluded with a settlement heavily in my favor. Emma lost a significant portion of her assets, and her boutique struggled in the aftermath of the scandal. Liam, predictably, had vanished from her life, leaving her to face the consequences alone. Mutual acquaintances occasionally updated me on her situation. She was still trying to rebuild, though her reputation in the business world had been irreparably damaged. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only a sense of closure. One evening, while walking through the park, I met someone. Her name was Laura, and she was everything Emma wasn't: genuine, kind, and refreshingly honest. Our connection was immediate, but I approached it cautiously, wary of repeating the past. Laura wasn't just a distraction from my pain. She was a reminder that love could be pure and untainted. As our relationship grew, I found myself smiling more, laughing more, and finally feeling like the world was full of possibility again. Months after the divorce, Emma reached out. Her tone was contrite, her words filled with apologies and regrets. She wanted to meet, to talk, to make things right. I agreed to meet her, not out of hope for reconciliation, but to close the chapter on our shared history. Sitting across from her, I saw a woman who was no longer the Emma I'd fallen in love with. She was a stranger, burdened by the weight of her choices. "I'm sorry for everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you." "I believe you," I replied. "But that doesn't change what happened." That meeting was the last time I saw Emma. We parted ways with a handshake, not a hug, and I walked away feeling lighter. It wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of the pain, the anger, and the sadness that had consumed me for so long. In the years that followed, I found happiness again. Laura and I built a life together, one rooted in trust and mutual respect. The lessons I'd learned from my past shaped me, making me a better partner and a stronger person. I often reflected on my journey, not with bitterness but with gratitude. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy me had instead become the catalyst for growth. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't about Emma or Liam or anyone else. It was about me, choosing to live, to love, and to thrive despite the pain. I had lost everything I thought I needed, only to discover everything I truly deserved. After Emma moved out and the divorce was finalized, I found myself in a strange new chapter of life. For over a decade, I had been half of a whole, my identity intertwined with hers. Now I was just me. At first, the quiet was unbearable. I'd grown used to her presence, even in the worst of times. The house felt cavernous, its silence echoing back memories I didn't want to face. To avoid it, I filled my days with activity: hiking trips with a local group, evening classes at a nearby community college, even a stint volunteering at an animal shelter. One morning, while sorting through old belongings, I came across our honeymoon photo album. For hours, I sat on the floor of the living room, flipping through pictures of a younger, happier version of ourselves. Each image told a story of love and optimism. Emma laughing on a sunlit beach, me holding her close during a sunset cruise, both of us blissfully unaware of the cracks that would later form. I could have thrown it all away, but I didn't. Instead, I carefully boxed it up and tucked it into the attic. It wasn't about holding on to the past. It was about letting it rest where it belonged. That was the day I realized I didn't want my life to be defined by what Emma had done. If she had destroyed the life we built together, then I would build something new. Therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. My therapist, Dr. Keller, was an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. During our first session, she asked me to describe how I felt in one word. Empty, I said after a long pause. Good, she replied, catching me off guard. Empty is a space that can be filled. Now let's talk about how to fill it. Week by week, I unpacked the emotional baggage Emma had left behind. We discussed the betrayal, of course, but also my own tendencies to avoid confrontation, my need to fix everything, and the guilt I carried for not seeing the warning signs earlier. Dr. Keller helped me understand that the betrayal wasn't my fault. Emma's choices are a reflection of her, not you, she said. But your healing? That's entirely in your hands. She challenged me to explore what happiness looked like without Emma in the picture. At first, I couldn't imagine it. But over time, I began to see glimpses. A Saturday morning spent woodworking in the garage, a quiet evening reading on the patio, a spontaneous road trip to the coast. These small moments of joy became the building blocks of a new life. While I was rebuilding, Emma was crumbling. I didn't actively keep tabs on her, but news had a way of finding me. Mutual friends reported that her boutique was struggling, its reputation tarnished by the scandal. Liam, predictably, had vanished, leaving her to face the consequences alone. One day, I received an email from an old acquaintance who worked in Emma's industry. It was a forwarded link to an article detailing the financial troubles of her business. The headline read, "From Boutique Star to Bankruptcy, the Fall of Emma Sinclair." Reading it didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. Instead, I felt a pang of sadness for the woman I had once loved. Her ambition, which I had admired so much, had become her undoing. I didn't reach out to her. I had nothing to say. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I met Laura. I was wandering through a local farmer's market, drawn by the smell of freshly baked bread and the vibrant colors of seasonal produce. She was running a booth selling handmade pottery, her hands covered in clay as she shaped a vase on a portable wheel. "Careful, that one's still wet," she said with a laugh when I reached for a freshly made bowl. Her voice was warm, her smile disarming. We started talking, first about pottery, then about the market, and eventually about life. She told me about her journey from a corporate career to following her passion for art, and I shared bits and pieces of my own story. Over the weeks that followed, I found myself returning to the market just to see her. We'd talk for hours, our conversations effortless and genuine. Laura wasn't just kind. She was real. She didn't try to hide her flaws or put on a facade. Our first date was simple, a walk through the park, followed by coffee at a quiet little cafe. She made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years, and for the first time since Emma's betrayal, I felt a spark of hope. Falling for Laura was different. It wasn't the head-over-heels infatuation I'd felt with Emma in high school. It was slower, steadier, like building a fire that would keep you warm through the coldest nights. Laura understood the scars I carried, both from Emma and from my own insecurities. She never pushed me to move faster than I was ready, but she also didn't let me wallow in self-pity. One night, as we sat on her porch watching the stars, she turned to me and said, "You know, you're allowed to be happy again." Her words stayed with me. Happiness wasn't something I had to earn or deserve. It was something I could choose. Months into my relationship with Laura, I received an unexpected call from Emma. Her voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began. "For everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to tell you that." Her words caught me off guard. For so long, I had imagined what I might say to her if given the chance. But in that moment, all I felt was a strange sense of detachment. "Emma," I said, "I hope you find peace. But I've moved on." There was a pause, then a quiet, "I understand." And with that, we said goodbye for the last time. Life with Laura was everything I hadn't realized I was missing. We built a home together, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional one. She encouraged me to embrace the parts of myself I had buried. My creativity, my sense of adventure, my ability to love without fear. Looking back, I didn't see Emma's betrayal as a tragedy anymore. It was a turning point, a painful but necessary step toward the life I was meant to live. I often thought about what Dr. Keller had said. Empty is a space that can be filled. And filled it was, with laughter, love, and a future brighter than I ever could have imagined. The day after Emma's call, I sat on my patio sipping coffee as the morning sun filtered through the trees. The house had changed over the months since she'd left. Rooms that once felt cold and lifeless were now filled with warmth and purpose. The guest room, where I'd once sought refuge from her, was now my office, lined with bookshelves and framed photographs of the people and places that mattered most. I spent hours tending to the garden, something Emma had always dismissed as a waste of time. To me, it was more than just planting flowers or pulling weeds. It was a quiet rebellion, a way of taking control of the chaos she had brought into my life. Each bloom felt like a small victory. The garage became my workshop. I threw myself into woodworking, crafting furniture and small trinkets that I sold at local markets. The process was meditative, measuring, cutting, sanding, and watching as raw materials transformed into something tangible, something beautiful. It was a reminder that even broken things could be remade. Laura's presence in my life became a balm for wounds I hadn't realized were still healing. She encouraged me to step outside my comfort zone, to explore parts of myself I had long neglected. One weekend, she signed us up for a pottery class. At first, I was skeptical. What did I, a man who measured success in straight lines and precise angles, have to do with something as messy and unpredictable as clay? But as my hands shaped the damp, spinning material, I found myself letting go of the need for perfection. Laura laughed when my first piece, a lopsided bowl, collapsed on the wheel. "It's not about the result," she said. "It's about the process." Her words resonated. Life wasn't about controlling every outcome. It was about showing up, trying, and finding joy in the effort. One evening, as Laura and I were preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was Sarah, my younger sister, standing on the porch with a suitcase in hand. "Got room for one more?" she asked, her smile a mix of exhaustion and mischief. Sarah had always been the wild card of the family, chasing dreams with reckless abandon. She'd been living abroad for years, hopping from one city to another, pursuing a career in photography. Her sudden arrival was both unexpected and a welcome distraction. Over the next few weeks, the house came alive with her energy. She filled the walls with her stories and laughter, her presence reminding me of the bonds I had neglected during my marriage to Emma. "Laura's good for you," Sarah said one night as we sat on the patio, watching the fire pit's embers glow. "You seem lighter, happier." I smiled, realizing she was right. Despite moving on, I couldn't fully escape Emma's shadow. News of her struggles continued to trickle in. Her boutique, once the pride of our small town, had closed its doors. Liam, the man she had risked everything for, was rumored to be engaged to someone else. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Emma was working as a manager at a chain clothing store in the city. It was a far cry from the ambitious entrepreneur I had once known. A part of me felt pity for her. But another part, the part that had spent countless nights drowning in anger and betrayal, saw her downfall as the natural consequence of her choices. Laura and I had been together for over a year when I decided it was time to take the next step. She had become an integral part of my life, not just a partner, but a true equal. On a crisp autumn morning, we hiked to a secluded spot overlooking the valley. It was one of our favorite places, a quiet refuge where we often went to escape the noise of the world. As the sun rose, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, I pulled a small box from my jacket pocket. "Laura," I began, my voice steady but my hands trembling. "You've brought light into places I thought would always be dark. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, pulling me into a kiss. Our wedding was the antithesis of the grand spectacle I'd had with Emma. It was intimate and simple, held in the backyard of the house Laura and I now shared. Only our closest friends and family were there. Sarah, of course, was my best person, standing by my side with her usual blend of sarcasm and support. Laura's mother officiated the ceremony, her words heartfelt and filled with wisdom. As we exchanged vows, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it while embracing the future. Not long after the wedding, I received an email from Emma. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." The message was long and rambling, filled with apologies and reflections on the mistakes she had made. She spoke of regret, of wishing she could undo the hurt she had caused. But what struck me most was her admission. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. I read the email twice before closing it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Laura and I made a tradition of taking annual road trips, exploring the parts of the country we had never seen. Each journey felt like a celebration of the life we were building together. On one trip, as we drove through the winding roads of the Pacific Northwest, I found myself reflecting on the path that had brought me here. Emma's betrayal, though painful, had been a catalyst. It forced me to confront the parts of myself I had ignored, to let go of a life that wasn't serving me, and to create something better. Years later, as I sat in the workshop teaching our son how to sand a piece of wood, I thought about the lessons I wanted to pass on to him. Life's going to throw you some curveballs, I said, watching him carefully guide the sandpaper along the grain. But it's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond. He looked up at me, his curious eyes so much like Laura's, and nodded. In the end, life didn't give me what I thought I wanted. It gave me what I needed. The pain, the loss, the rebuilding, all of it had led me to a place of contentment I never could have imagined. Emma was a chapter, an important one, but no longer the defining story of my life. That honor belonged to the life I built with Laura, the family we created, and the future we faced together with open hearts. As the sun set on another day, I sat on the porch with Laura by my side, our hands intertwined. The world, I realized, was full of second chances, and I had made the most of mine. Life with Laura wasn't just about love. It was about partnership. She didn't just fill the void Emma had left. She helped me create something entirely new. We supported each other's dreams, built a home filled with warmth and laughter, and eventually decided to grow our family. When Laura told me she was pregnant, I felt an overwhelming mix of excitement and fear. Having a child was something Emma and I had talked about endlessly, but never pursued. With Laura, the dream became a reality. The months leading up to our son's birth were a blur of preparations. Laura insisted on painting the nursery herself, even as I tried to convince her to take it easy. She was stubborn in the best way, determined to make the space perfect. The day he was born was one of the most emotional of my life. Holding him in my arms for the first time, I felt a kind of love I hadn't known was possible. We named him Ethan, after Laura's late grandfather, and from the moment he entered our lives, everything changed. Fatherhood was both rewarding and humbling. There were sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and moments of doubt where I wondered if I was doing enough, being enough. But there were also quiet mornings with Ethan asleep on my chest, his tiny hand gripping my finger, and the way his eyes lit up when I walked into the room. Laura and I navigated the challenges together. She had a way of keeping me grounded, reminding me that we didn't have to be perfect parents, we just had to be present. One evening, after Ethan had finally gone to sleep, Laura and I sat on the couch, exhausted but happy. "You're a good dad," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. Her words stayed with me. I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was building his. 2 years after Ethan's birth, I ran into Emma unexpectedly. It happened at a coffee shop in the city, a place I rarely visited. She was sitting by the window, staring into a cup of coffee as though it might hold the answers to all her problems. She didn't notice me at first, and I debated whether to approach her. But something in her posture, the slump of her shoulders, the weariness in her expression, made me pause. She looked different, older, somehow and not just in the physical sense. I walked over, and when she looked up, her eyes widened in surprise. "Hi, Emma," I said, my voice calm but cautious. "Hi," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. We exchanged pleasantries, and she asked about my life. I told her about Laura and Ethan, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes, regret, perhaps, or longing for a life she no longer had. "I'm happy for you," she said finally. "You deserve it." There was no malice in her tone, no bitterness, just acceptance. It was a brief encounter, but as I walked away, I realized it was the closure I hadn't known I needed. As Ethan grew, I found myself returning to old hobbies I had once abandoned. Photography, something I had dabbled in during college, became a way to capture the moments that now define my life. I started with family portraits, Laura and Ethan in the backyard, their laughter frozen in time. But soon, I ventured out into the world, capturing landscapes, cityscapes, and candid moments of strangers going about their lives. Photography wasn't just a hobby. It was a form of healing. Each image was a reminder of how far I had come, a testament to the beauty that could be found even in the smallest, simplest things. Sarah, who had spent years traveling the world, eventually decided to settle down. She moved to a nearby city, her photography career thriving as she opened her own gallery. Her visits became more frequent, and Ethan adored her. Annie Sarah was his favorite playmate, always ready with a camera to capture his antics or a new adventure to share. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Sarah raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "To new beginnings," I echoed, grateful for the family I had rediscovered and rebuilt. While I found joy in photography, Laura pursued her own dreams. Her pottery business flourished, and she opened a small studio in town where she taught classes and sold her work. Ethan loved visiting the studio, his tiny hands often covered in clay as he tried to mimic his mother's creations. Watching the two of them together filled me with a sense of contentment I hadn't thought possible. Laura's success wasn't just about financial stability. It was about fulfillment. She had found her passion, and in doing so, she inspired me to continue pursuing mine. There were still moments when the past crept in, uninvited and unbidden. Certain songs, places, or even smells would bring back memories of Emma and the life we had shared. But those memories no longer held power over me. They were just that, memories. They shaped who I was, but they didn't define who I had become. One day, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I came across the honeymoon photo album I had packed away so long ago. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, I opened it. The images didn't sting the way they once had. Instead, they felt like a distant echo of a different time, a different version of myself. I closed the album and placed it back in the box, ready to let it rest once more. Years later, Laura and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a trip to the very beach where I had proposed. Ethan, now a curious and adventurous boy of 8, ran ahead, collecting seashells and chasing the waves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Laura and I sat together, our hands intertwined. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "We have," I agreed, pulling her closer. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been marked by pain, loss, and the kind of heartbreak I wouldn't wish on anyone. But it had also been filled with growth, love, and the kind of joy that made every hardship worth it. As I grew older, I found myself thinking more about the lessons I wanted to pass on to Ethan. I wanted him to know that life wouldn't always be kind, that people wouldn't always be trustworthy, and that pain was an inevitable part of the human experience. But I also wanted him to know that healing was possible, that love could be found even after heartbreak, and that every ending was just the beginning of something new. In the end, my story wasn't about Emma's betrayal or even Laura's love. It was about resilience, the ability to face life's challenges head-on and come out stronger on the other side. Sitting on the porch with Laura by my side, watching Ethan play in the yard, I realized that I had everything I needed. The life I had built was far from perfect, but it was mine, and for that I was profoundly grateful. As the years passed, forgiveness became an unexpected gift, Not just for Emma, but for myself. I didn't forgive her to excuse her actions or to let go of what had happened. Instead, I forgave her because carrying the weight of resentment wasn't worth it anymore. I thought of forgiveness like clearing an overgrown path. It wasn't easy, and it didn't mean forgetting the thorns and stones that had once made it impassable. But it allowed me to move forward without tripping on old roots. Emma remained a distant memory, but one without malice. I often wondered if she had found peace, a new purpose, or a life where she could heal. When Ethan turned 12, his curiosity grew sharper, and he began to ask about the life I had before Laura. "Dad," he asked one evening as we worked in the garage, "were you married before, Mom?" I paused, surprised by his question. Laura and I had never hidden the truth, but we hadn't gone into detail either. "Yes," I said, setting down the piece of wood I'd been sanding. "Her name was Emma. We were together for a long time, but things didn't work out." "Why not?" he pressed, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity. I thought carefully before answering. "Because sometimes people grow apart and they make choices that hurt each other. But those choices don't have to define your life forever." He nodded, absorbing my words. "Do you miss her?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm grateful for what I learned from that time. It helped me become the person I am today, and it led me to your mom and to you." Satisfied with my answer, he grinned and returned to his project. I watched him, marveling at how the past could shape the present without overshadowing it. Laura and I made it a point to celebrate life's small victories. Ethan's first soccer goal, a particularly beautiful piece of pottery she created, or even just the way the garden flourished in spring. We learned that joy wasn't in grand gestures or perfect moments. It was in the everyday, the mundane, the quiet acts of love and care that wove our lives together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance, Laura turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" she asked. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not with regret. I think about it as a reminder of how lucky I am to have found you." Her smile was soft and full of understanding. "I feel the same way." As Ethan grew into a teenager, he began to develop a love for photography, just like his Aunt Sarah. They spent hours together, exploring the world through their lenses, capturing moments I might have otherwise overlooked. On his 16th birthday, Sarah gifted him her old camera, a weathered but beloved piece of equipment she had used during her early travels. "It's yours now," she said, ruffling his hair. "Take care of it, and it'll take care of you." Watching Ethan find his passion filled me with pride. It reminded me that life wasn't just about what we built for ourselves. It was about what we passed on to the ones we loved. On our 20th wedding anniversary, Laura and I returned to the beach where we had first said, "I love you." Ethan, now in college, sent us a video message. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad," he said, holding up a photo of us from our wedding day. "Thanks for showing me what real love looks like." His words brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I realized that the life Laura and I had created wasn't just about surviving the pain of the past. It was about thriving in the present and building a future filled with hope. We walked along the shore, hand in hand, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The waves lapped at our feet, a gentle reminder of life's ebb and flow. Years later, when I retired, Laura and I decided to downsize. We moved into a cozy cottage near the mountains, a place where we could enjoy the quiet beauty of nature. As we packed up our old home, I came across the box of memories I had tucked away in the attic so many years ago. The honeymoon photo album was still there, along with other relics of a life I had once lived. I hesitated for a moment, then called Laura over. Together, we went through the box, not with sadness but with curiosity. "Do you want to keep any of this?" she asked gently. "No," I said with certainty. "I've kept the parts of my past that matter. The rest can stay behind." We donated the box, letting go of the last remnants of a chapter that no longer defined me. As the years rolled on, Laura and I welcomed grandchildren into our lives. Ethan, now married, often brought his family to visit, filling our home with the sound of laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. One day, as I sat on the porch with my grandson on my lap, he looked up at me and asked, "Grandpa, were you ever sad?" I chuckled, caught off guard by his question. Yes, little one. I've been sad many times. But you know what? What? He asked, his eyes wide. Sadness doesn't last forever. It's like a storm. Sometimes it feels like it'll never end, but it always does. And when it's over, the sun comes out again. He nodded solemnly, as though my words carried the weight of the world. In the twilight of my life, I often found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. It wasn't a straight path, nor an easy one, but it was mine, and I had walked it with courage and hope. Emma's betrayal, while painful, had been a catalyst for change. It had taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of choosing love even in the face of loss. Laura had been my anchor, my partner, and my greatest blessing. Together, we had built a life that was full, rich, and meaningful. As I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains with Laura by my side, I felt a deep sense of peace. Life hadn't been perfect, but it had been beautiful. And for that, I was endlessly grateful. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss interesting life stories, and write a comment if you like the story. See you.